The chandeliers inside the Grand Monarch Hotel ballroom glowed with a soft gold warmth, reflecting off crystal table settings and polished marble floors. Guests moved through the room in elegant gowns and tailored suits, their voices buzzing with excitement as they awaited the start of Henry's annual corporate celebration, an event so exclusive that attending it felt like entering a private kingdom. Henry stood near the stage, his expression sharp and composed. His suit was impeccable, his posture rigid, his presence commanding. He looked every bit like the accomplished CEO who built an empire from strategy, discipline, and an unshakable belief in his own image. But tonight, he had a personal mission. He leaned toward his assistant, barely lowering his voice. His tone wasn't loud, yet it carried enough frost to chill the air around him. The assistant nodded quickly and hurried off. This was supposed to be Henry's night of triumph. And Rita's moment of embarrassment. Guests whispered among themselves, sensing the tension though they didn't yet understand it. The ballroom doors were about to become the focus of every wandering eye. Henry straightened his cufflinks, preparing for the entrance he'd been anticipating. The doorman pulled one of the tall double doors open. Rita stepped inside. But she wasn't alone. Her hand was linked with two small hands, one on each side. Two children walked beside her, dressed neatly, bright-eyed, and carrying an unmistakable resemblance to Henry. Conversations broke mid-sentence. Cameras lifted. Phones flashed. The resemblance wasn't mild. It was striking. Same jawline. Same light eyes. Same presence. Henry's confidence cracked in an instant. His shoulders stiffened. His breath caught. The color left his face so quickly, it almost looked like the life had been drained from him. The humiliation he planned for Rita had flipped so violently that it now hovered over him like a spotlight he couldn't escape. The man who once pushed her aside for the sake of his image was now staring at the very proof that his decisions had consequences he never imagined. The children looked around curiously, unaware of the earthquake their arrival had triggered. Rita stood tall, elegant, composed, nothing like the woman Henry believed he could quietly diminish. Her confidence reached every corner of the room without her saying a single word. Eyes shifted from Henry to Rita, to the twins, back to Henry. The CEO who always controlled every narrative suddenly couldn't control a single thing. Rita's entrance wasn't just unexpected. It was justice walking on two little feet. Henry ended their relationship years ago because he cared more about status than love. He chose reputation over loyalty. He shut her out before she could even speak. But now, the truth he abandoned is standing in front of him. Two faces carrying the features he could never deny. His past choices have come to collect their debt. And Rita? She didn't come to plead. She came to show him exactly what he lost. Stay with me to see how Rita teaches Henry a lesson he will never forget. Please like this video and comment. It truly helps YouTube push this story to more wonderful viewers like you. Thank you so much. Welcome to Mr. Steve's Stories, where everyday moments turn into powerful, unforgettable tales. If you're joining us for the first time, we're thrilled to have you here. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the stories that move hearts, spark imagination, and remind us what truly matters. Let's dive into today's story. Long before the night Rita walked into Henry's event and turned the entire ballroom into a whispering storm, their story had begun in a quieter corner of Las Vegas, a place far from polished marble floors and designer gowns. Rita had always thrived in movement, color, and creativity. Her world wasn't built on privilege. It was shaped by culture and community. On the west side of Vegas, people lived loudly, laughed freely, and handled hardship with jokes, music, and resilience. It was a place where folks shouted greetings across balconies, where cousins argued over dance moves, and where families gathered on porches when the desert heat finally dipped. Rita grew up breathing that energy. She learned early that confidence wasn't an accessory, it was survival. By 30, she had earned a reputation across Vegas as the woman who could turn any room into a masterpiece. Weddings, birthdays, business launches, celebrity parties, Rita transformed them all. Her decorations looked expensive, even when her budget wasn't. Her ideas were bold, vibrant, and memorable. People didn't just hire her for her work. They hired her for her presence. Her laughter lit up rooms. Her quick humor disarmed even the stiffest client. Her energy made people believe their event would be unforgettable long before she set anything up. That was exactly why a major corporation hired her for an evening ceremony that would change everything. Henry's company. Henry at that time was every bit the image of the controlled, successful executive. His world was built on straight lines, polished shoes, precise schedules, and conversations that always served a purpose. He grew up in a home where emotions were managed, where silence weighed more than words, and where expectations replaced affection. He didn't know what warmth felt like until Rita stepped into his world. The night they met, Rita walked into the venue wearing work jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt tied at the waist. She scanned the ballroom with a practiced eye, already imagining colors, lighting, and centerpieces. Her team followed behind her, pushing carts filled with materials. Henry watched from across the room, confused by how effortlessly she commanded the space. Every person who spoke to her walked away smiling. Every instruction she gave was clear, confident, and delivered with charm. At first, Henry approached her with the stiff politeness he used with all vendors. "Miss Rita, I'm Henry, the CEO. I just wanted to ensure everything is on schedule." She looked at him, not intimidated, not distracted, just real. "Oh, relax," she said with a grin. "I've got this. You're paying for excellence, right?" The boldness caught him off guard. No one spoke to him like that. No one challenged him with a smile. Rita pointed around the room as she talked. "I'll make your event look so good your board might finally stop frowning." Henry blinked. Was she teasing him? Yes, she was. And instead of being offended, he found himself trying not to laugh. For the rest of the evening, he watched her work. She cracked jokes with staff, adjusted flowers with gentle precision, fixed lighting issues before anyone noticed them, and brought a warmth to the space that money alone could not buy. By the time the event began, the ballroom felt alive. It felt like Rita had wrapped the entire night in a feeling, one Henry didn't have a name for yet. When her work was done, she approached him with a playful smile. "See? Told you I had it handled." Henry nodded, still confused at how comfortable she made him feel. "Thank you, Rita. This looks better than I imagined." She winked. "I know." That moment, simple as it was, marked the start of something neither of them planned. Their chemistry didn't hit like lightning. It arrived like a slow sunrise, warm, steady, impossible to ignore. Henry found excuses to call her for more corporate events. Rita teased him for being too serious to function. He admired her ability to soften every room she walked into. She admired how differently he treated her compared to other wealthy clients, respectful, attentive, quietly fascinated. Two worlds that didn't belong together began drifting toward each other anyway. It felt natural, it felt right, and, for a while, it felt unstoppable. The flashback deepens in the months after Rita and Henry's first meeting. What began as light teasing and unexpected chemistry slowly shifted into something neither of them could downplay anymore. Henry found reasons to meet Rita outside corporate events, though he tried to tell himself they were business discussions. Rita laughed at that excuse every time. What drew Henry in was how natural everything felt with her. When they talked, he wasn't calculating his words. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to uphold an image. He simply existed, something he had never been allowed to do growing up. Rita didn't treat him like a title or a paycheck. She treated him like a man who could loosen his shoulders and breathe. Their differences made their bond even more powerful. Where Henry moved in straight lines, Rita moved in creative curves. Where Henry spoke carefully, Rita spoke freely. Where Henry planned for everything, Rita made him enjoy the moments he never planned at all. Weekends turned into shared dinners. Dinners turned into inside jokes. Inside jokes turned into a relationship that felt effortless, grounded, and bright. Henry had dated before, but none of those relationships ever touched him this deeply. They had been polite, distant, transactional, reflections of his world. Rita, however, saw through every polished layer he wore. One night, after attending a charity gala together, Henry sat across from Rita in a small Vegas restaurant on Charleston Boulevard. It wasn't a place his colleagues would approve of, too casual, too lively, too real. Yet, Henry loved it. The noise didn't overwhelm him the way he expected. Rita's presence steadied him. "You know," Rita said, swirling her drink. "You smile more now." Henry blinked. "I do. Yes," she replied easily. "Before, your smile looked like something your assistant scheduled into your day." He laughed, genuinely, something that still surprised both of them. But as the relationship grew stronger, so did the scrutiny. Henry's world was not gentle. It was filled with board members who judged quietly, shareholders who observed everything, and a wealthy family who believed reputation was the only currency that mattered. Whispers began to spread. Is she suitable? Does she fit the image of our CEO? What will investors think? Why her? Henry tried to shield Rita from the pressure, but the more he tried to protect their relationship, the more the outside world pushed back. His board questioned his priorities. His family made passive comments about compatibility. His elite friends hinted that Rita didn't belong in their environment. Rita felt the shift. Henry grew tense. His smiles became shorter. His decisions became distant. One night, the tension finally snapped. They were in Henry's penthouse, overlooking the lights of Las Vegas. Rita had cooked dinner, trying to bring warmth back into a space that had grown cold. Henry arrived late, shoulders tight, irritation written in his movements. "Henry," she asked softly, "did something happen?" He set his briefcase down and avoided her eyes. "The board thinks my personal life is becoming distracting," she exhaled. "So, I'm the problem now?" "I didn't say that," he replied quickly. "You didn't have to." Henry rubbed his temple. "Rita, you don't understand how much pressure." "Of course I understand," she cut in. "But what I don't understand is why I'm always the one you shrink away from when someone frowns at you." His silence pressed against the room like a heavy door. Rita stepped closer. "Do you want me, or do you want their approval?" "Rita, please, this isn't simple." "It is to me," she said quietly. "You either stand with me, or you let them pull you away." That's when Henry made the decision that would haunt both of them. "I think we should take a break." Her breath trembled. "A break?" His voice hardened, not with anger, but with fear. Fear of losing standing, fear of disappointing people he shouldn't have cared about more than her. "It's better this way," he whispered. For a moment, Rita felt the world freeze around her. The same man who once looked at her like she was the one bright spot in his life was now choosing to dim her light to protect an image. "Wow," she said softly. "After everything, this is how you end it." Henry's jaw tightened, but he didn't reach for her. He didn't fight. He didn't explain. He simply let her walk away. Rita left that penthouse heartbroken, but she didn't know she was leaving with more than her shattered trust. She was pregnant. With twins. She didn't discover it until weeks later, long after the breakup. And by then, returning to Henry felt impossible. He had shut her out so completely that going back felt like reopening a wound that hadn't even begun to heal. So she carried the truth alone. She chose peace over pain. She chose motherhood over a man who had chosen status. She chose to raise her children with the same warmth and resilience she grew up with. Henry never knew. Not until the night she walked into his ballroom holding two small hands that mirrored his own. Her emotional struggle, but determination. Scenes of her working events in Las Vegas while carrying twins. Rita didn't expect her world to tilt again so soon after the breakup. She had spent the first few weeks trying to rebuild her routines, focusing on work, leaning on her inner strength, and refusing to let herself drown in the disappointment Henry left behind. She refused to let heartbreak define her. She refused to let anyone steal the fire she had carried since childhood. But then came the morning when she woke up feeling heavier than usual. Her body felt unfamiliar, like something inside her had shifted. She brushed it off at first, blaming stress, long work hours, and the emotional weight she had been carrying. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. One evening, after finishing a small baby shower setup in Henderson, she found herself standing in the aisle of a 24-hour pharmacy, with her hands shaking slightly as she picked up a pregnancy test. She didn't allow herself to think too deeply. She didn't allow herself to panic. She simply paid, walked home, and waited for the results. When the two lines appeared, she sat on the edge of her bed and tried to breathe. Pregnant. She whispered the word, trying to taste it, understand it, accept it. But before she could fully absorb the first shock, something inside her told her there was more she needed to know. She scheduled an appointment at a clinic on Rancho Drive the next morning. The ultrasound room was quiet, cool, and bright. Rita lay back, her heart pounding so loudly she swore the nurse could hear it. She watched the screen, waiting for a sign, any sign, that would help her understand what her life was about to become. The nurse smiled gently. "There's something you should know." Rita held her breath. "You're having twins." For a moment, the room didn't feel real. It felt like she had stepped into a version of her life she hadn't prepared for, one filled with fear, responsibility, and unexpected joy. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming truth that life was giving her more than she had ever imagined. 2 heartbeats, 2 lives, 2 futures tied to hers. She left the clinic with a swirl of emotions. The shock became a quiet acceptance. Acceptance grew into strength. Strength fed into determination. She whispered to herself on the walk home, "It's just us now. And we're going to be okay." And she meant it. Rita threw herself into her work, not as an escape, but as a declaration of resilience. Each event she decorated carried a certain glow, a certain purpose, as if the love growing inside her radiated through her designs. She took on weddings at the Bellagio, corporate parties on the Strip, private soirees in Summerlin, each project reminding her that she still belonged in a world of beauty even if her personal life had just taken an unexpected turn. Carrying twins wasn't easy. The exhaustion hit harder. Her cravings changed by the week. Her moods shifted between laughter and tears with little warning. But she never missed a job. One afternoon while decorating a ballroom for a quinceañera, she paused, pressing a hand to her stomach as the twins kicked gently. She smiled, whispering, "You two better behave. I've got deadlines." Her assistants helped with the heavier tasks, but Rita handled most details herself. She adjusted floral arrangements, layered table runners, tested lighting angles, and inspected every final touch. Clients adored her professionalism, never suspecting that she was doing twice the work with twice the effort. People around her noticed a new glow, a softer joy behind her usual confidence. They commented on her strength, though no one knew the full truth. She kept her pregnancy private, not because she was ashamed, but because she wanted to fully understand her new reality before letting the world into it. At night, she would sit in her small living room with a notebook, planning finances, schedules, and ways to balance motherhood with her business. She wasn't frightened anymore. She was focused. These children, growing steadily inside her, gave her a deeper purpose than she had ever known. They were not reminders of heartbreak. They were reminders of possibility. They were her future, her pride, her motivation. Day by day, Rita became stronger. Her love grew even before she met them. Her determination sharpened. She spoke to them often while working. "You two are going to have the best life. I promise you that." And in the quiet spaces between her words and their tiny kicks, she felt a connection that healed what Henry's decision had shattered. His career success, but emotional burnout. Failed relationships. Everyone sees his decline except him. When Rita walked out of Henry's penthouse that night, he convinced himself he made the practical decision. One that protected his image, his position, his family's expectations, and the view others had of him. But practicality doesn't silence loneliness, and logic doesn't warm a bed. The first week after the breakup, Henry threw himself into work with the same rigid discipline he applied to every crisis. His calendar filled with back-to-back meetings, investor calls, board sessions, and charity appearances. He told himself that structure would keep him steady, that routine would bury the emptiness forming inside him. It didn't. His office, once a place of control and pride, now felt strangely hollow. The long glass windows overlooking the Strip didn't excite him. The sleek furniture, chosen for its elegance, suddenly felt like props in a life that didn't belong to him. He noticed the shift but refused to acknowledge it. His assistant did. His board did. Even his driver did. Henry had always been reserved, quiet, composed, traits that made him appear confident and collected. But now, his silence felt different. It wasn't control. It was vacancy. Meetings dragged on without spark. His decisions became slow, mechanical. The passion he once poured into building his company dimmed, as if something essential had been unplugged inside him. He told himself it was stress. He told himself it was pressure. He told himself it was fatigue. But the truth was simpler. Rita had been the only bright spot in a life full of polished emptiness. Without her, his world returned to what it was before, cold and structured, but now painfully aware of everything it lacked. Henry tried dating again, mostly because people around him encouraged it. His siblings insisted he get back out there. Board members suggested he stabilize his personal life. Friends pushed him to attend high-end gatherings, blind dates and exclusive dinners. He obliged, but every single attempt felt forced. The women he met were polished, educated, perfectly groomed, products of the same circles Henry was raised in. They spoke about mergers, fashion, travel, expectations, stocks, philanthropy. Topics Henry once enjoyed, but now felt drained by. None of them laughed the way Rita did. None of them challenged him. None of them made him feel seen. Conversations with them felt scripted, rehearsed, predictable. The smiles were polite. The compliments were shallow. The connection, if it could be called that, never reached beyond the surface. One night, after ending a particularly dull dinner with a potential partner selected by his family, Henry sat in his car staring at the dashboard. He realized he hadn't smiled once, not a smirk, not a flicker of amusement. He remembered Rita teasing him in the restaurant on Charleston Boulevard, calling out his stiff habits, poking fun at his seriousness, making him laugh just by being herself. That memory hit him with a force he didn't anticipate. He missed her, more than he had ever admitted, more than he was willing to confront. Meanwhile, his success at work continued, but without the satisfaction that once drove him. He received awards. He signed major contracts. He secured partnerships that would elevate his company for years. Yet every win felt muted. At the annual quarterly evaluation, one board member pulled him aside privately. "Henry, you're achieving everything, but you seem distant, disconnected." "I'm fine," Henry answered automatically. But his tone lacked conviction, and the man's concerned expression confirmed that Henry's internal struggle was no longer invisible. Even his parents, who rarely commented on emotional matters, noticed he was quieter than usual. His mother once asked during a family dinner, "Are you sure everything is all right, Henry?" He nodded, but his eyes didn't. Everyone saw the decline except him. Or rather, he refused to see it. His nights grew longer. His mornings grew heavier. His focus drifted. His joy vanished. He didn't know the depth of what he had lost, because he didn't know what Rita carried the moment she walked out of his life. Two lives connected to him, growing day by day. Some nights, when the city lights reflected across his penthouse walls, Henry would sit alone at the dining table, staring at the space where Rita once placed meals she cooked for them. He remembered her laughter bouncing off the high ceilings, her voice cutting through the stiff silence he had lived with for years. He wondered, had he been too harsh, too abrupt, too afraid? But every time his heart began to question, his mind shut it down. Focus on your role. Focus on your image. Focus on the company. Yet with each passing month, his emotional disconnect grew clearer. What he didn't know was that across Las Vegas, two small heartbeats were growing stronger, connected to him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. And one day soon, the truth he tried to outrun would walk straight into the middle of his carefully crafted world. As the months passed, Rita adapted to her pregnancy with a strength that surprised even her. She continued working as long as her body allowed, slowing down only when the twins announced their presence with stronger kicks and movements that sometimes stopped her mid-task. Her belly grew quickly, and by the 7th month, her assistants insisted she sit down more often than she stood. But Rita being Rita, she still found a way to joke about it. "I'm not carrying babies anymore," she'd say, while adjusting flowers on a tall arrangement. "I'm carrying 2 tiny personal trainers who do not believe in rest." Her team laughed, shaking their heads as they gently took the ladder away from her for the 20th time. When her pregnancy finally reached the last stretch, Rita took time off to prepare for the arrival of her children. She decorated their small nursery with the same care she gave to her clients' large events. Soft colors, cozy blankets, neatly folded clothes, handmade decorations. Her love for design wrapped around the room like a warm embrace. She spoke to her babies each night, rubbing her belly while humming tunes from childhood block parties her family used to host. "I don't know exactly how I'm going to do this," she whispered one evening, "but I know we'll figure it out together." And she meant every word. The day the twins arrived was both exhausting and unforgettable. Rita went into labor early in the morning. Her cousin drove her to the hospital while Rita gripped a seatbelt and tried to breathe through the contractions. "These two better come out loving each other," she groaned. "Because they're fighting inside me like they're arguing over the TV remote." Her cousin burst into laughter while trying to speed through Vegas traffic. Hours later, after sweat, tears, pain, and determination, Rita heard the first cries. A moment later, she heard the second. 2 babies. 2 little souls she already adored. When the nurse placed them in her arms, Rita cried, not from exhaustion but from awe. Their tiny fingers wrapped around hers, and their eyes fluttered open with newness and innocence. They were perfect. She whispered their first lullaby through tears, rocking them gently as her heart expanded in ways she never experienced before. Motherhood arrived with both sweetness and chaos. The twins rarely slept at the same time. One always wanted to be held when the other needed feeding. Rita learned to balance bottles with one hand and lullabies with the other. She became skilled at changing diapers half asleep and soothing tiny cries at 3 in the morning. And yet, even with the exhaustion, there were moments that made her laugh until her stomach hurt. Like when the twins somehow managed to kick off both their socks at the exact same time, or when she looked away for 2 seconds and found one baby drooling on the other's forehead, or when she attempted a cute newborn photo shoot and ended up with a dozen pictures of squirming limbs and scrunched up faces. Those moments made the long nights worth it. Her home was filled with soft coos, little hiccups, unexpected giggles, and the smell of baby lotion. It became a world of its own, warm, messy, comforting, and full of love. Rita didn't miss Henry during this time. She didn't have space for regret. Her life had shifted into a new chapter, and every day proved she had made the right choice. But life had a way of circling back, even when the past felt buried. Several months after the twins were born, while the babies napped in their crib, Rita sifted through her mail at the kitchen counter. Bills, coupons, and a few event inquiries filled the stack. Then she saw it, an elegant envelope with embossed lettering. It was an invitation to Henry's annual corporate awards event. The same event she once decorated. The same event where she and Henry first crossed into each other's worlds. She opened the envelope slowly, her eyes scanning the details. The event was grand, exclusive, and heavily publicized every year. For Rita, attending meant stepping into Henry's domain again. Except this time, she wasn't the woman he walked away from. She was a mother. She was stronger. She was complete. What she didn't know was this: Henry planned to use this event to showcase how much better his life was without her. He intended to make her feel small, forgetting the very real truth that life had changed for both of them, and not in the way he assumed. Rita placed the invitation on the counter and glanced at her sleeping twins. "Should we go?" she whispered. Even asleep, one of them kicked, as if answering. Rita smiled. The idea of walking into Henry's carefully crafted world with her children, his children, stirred something powerful inside her. Not vengeance, not pride, something deeper: closure, strength, truth. She picked up the invitation again, her decision already made. "We're going," she said softly, "and we're going together." This moment set the stage for everything that would happen the night she stepped into the ballroom, confident, calm, holding the hands of the 2 little lives Henry never knew he created. Henry invites Rita on stage with intentions to embarrass her. Unexpected reactions in the crowd. Everyone admires her confidence. The ballroom at the Grand Monarch had only grown louder since Rita stepped inside with the twins. The initial shock had shifted into buzzing whispers, curious glances, and subtle nudges between guests. Some looked at Rita with admiration, others with fascination, but none with the judgment Henry expected. Rita held her children's hands calmly, guiding them through the room with a poise that outshone the chandeliers. People parted as she walked, not out of pity, but respect, an energy Henry felt instantly but could not understand. From the stage, Henry forced himself to stand taller. His throat tightened. His original plan, to make Rita feel small, was already slipping out of his grasp, but he refused to accept defeat. Not openly. Not here. He stepped up to the microphone as the ballroom lights dimmed slightly, and the spotlights circled toward him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice smoother than he felt inside. "Before we begin tonight's main ceremony, I'd like to acknowledge someone very special." A hush fell across the crowd. Rita lifted her gaze from the twins, sensing the shift. Henry gestured toward her, pasting on a calm smile. "Rita, would you join me on stage?" The crowd turned in her direction. Henry in. Rita didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She didn't look confused. Instead, she stood still for a moment, adjusting the twins' hands gently before offering them a reassuring smile. Then she began walking toward the stage. Whispers rose behind her. "She looks stunning. She carries herself so well. She's glowing. Is that his ex? Whoever she is, she's confident. These weren't mocking reactions. They were admiration whispered behind manicured hands and champagne glasses. Rita climbed the steps, her posture straight, her expression calm. The twins stayed close, gripping her fingers, their presence amplifying the moment with innocence that made every adult in the room pay attention. Henry hadn't expected this. He expected trembling. He expected retreat. He expected the same woman who once wept in his penthouse doorway. But the Rita standing before him now, she radiated control. "Thank you for joining us," Henry began, clearing his throat. Rita tilted her head slightly, her expression polite but unreadable. "You invited me." A few people chuckled under their breath, not mocking her, but impressed by her directness. Henry felt heat rise in his face. He forced a tight smile and continued, "Yes, of course. I thought it would be meaningful for everyone to see you again." The crowd looked between them, sensing the tension but unsure where it would lead. Rita clasped her hands in front of her, saying nothing yet. She didn't need to. Her presence itself challenged Henry's rehearsed composure. Henry gestured toward the audience. "For those who don't know, Rita used to work closely with our company events. She was always imaginative." Rita raised a brow, but her smile remained gentle. The audience didn't hear insult. They heard admiration hidden behind awkward wording. Henry noticed this too late. "So," he continued, "I thought it would be appropriate to highlight how far the company has come since." His sentence halted as he saw something that rattled him again. People weren't nodding in agreement. They weren't smirking at Rita. They were watching her, not him, watching the strength in her stance, watching the way she held her children protectively yet proudly, watching a woman who didn't bow under pressure, even on a stage built by the man who hurt her. Henry swallowed tightly. This was not going how he scripted it. Rita gave him a small, controlled smile, one that said she knew exactly what he was trying to do, and that it wouldn't work. Someone in the audience whispered, loud enough for others to hear, "She seems more composed than the CEO," and the murmured agreement spread. The shift in the room was subtle, but powerful. Rita wasn't the one being measured tonight. Henry was. Twins say something innocent but revealing. Crowd notices resemblance. The silence stretching across the ballroom was tight enough to hear every breath. Henry stood at the podium, trying to reclaim authority, but the weight of the moment pulled the attention toward Rita instead. Her calm presence unnerved him more than any argument she could have shouted. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "As I was saying," Henry resumed, "it's important to acknowledge people who made contributions in the past." Rita gently cut in. "With all due respect, Henry, you didn't invite me here to acknowledge anything." A ripple of surprised laughter moved across the room. Henry stiffened. Rita wasn't harsh. She wasn't dramatic. She simply stated the truth with a confidence that exposed his intentions without raising her voice. Henry forced a smile. "Rita, let's keep this professional." "Professional?" She echoed lightly, tilting her head. "You called me on stage without warning. I'm just helping the audience understand what's happening." Her tone wasn't confrontational. It was composed, measured, controlled, and that made it sting more. Somewhere in the front row, a woman whispered, "She's handling this with class." Another responded, "He wasn't expecting that." Henry heard the murmurs. His jaw tightened. He tried again to steer the event. "Regardless, I thought it would be appropriate for everyone to see how life has progressed for both of us." Rita smiled politely. "Well, they're certainly seeing something." The audience laughed again, this time louder. Henry's throat constricted. His perfectly rehearsed plan was slipping further away by the second. He glanced down at the twins, expecting them to shy away from the crowd, but instead, one of them stepped forward. A little boy, steady on his feet, looked up at Henry with innocent eyes that mirrored his own. "Mommy," the child said softly, tugging Rita's dress. "Is that the man you told us used to make you smile?" Several guests gasped. Henry's face drained of color. Rita's composure didn't crack. She glanced down at her son, brushing his hair gently. "Yes, baby. He used to." The room swallowed the moment whole. But the second twin, curious and unfiltered, took a step closer to Henry and stared directly at him. "Why does he look like us?" The words hit the crowd like a dropped glass. A few people covered their mouths. Others leaned forward. Some exchanged looks of shock and recognition, because now that the question was asked, it couldn't be unseen. The resemblance was undeniable. The eyes, the jawline, the expression, every trait matched Henry with unnerving accuracy. Henry struggled to keep his breathing steady. His chest tightened as he stared at the children, his children, and watched an entire ballroom piece together the truth he never imagined would confront him in public. Rita didn't hide the twins behind her. She didn't explain. She didn't defend. She simply placed a hand on each of their shoulders, standing tall with them beside her, as if she had always been prepared for this moment. Her silence was louder than any accusation could ever be. Henry swallowed hard, trying to form words, but all that escaped was a fractured, "Rita. What, who?" Rita lifted her chin slightly. "Henry, you don't get to question anything right now." The crowd murmured in agreement. Her tone wasn't fueled by revenge. It was fueled by boundaries strengthened through pain and healing. Henry opened his mouth again, desperate to regain footing, but the man behind the front table spoke softly to the person next to him. "They look exactly like him." The whisper traveled quickly. No one needed confirmation. The truth had already spread beyond the stage. Rita held her children close, not protectively, but proudly. She didn't shrink. She didn't tremble. She didn't look away. In that moment, she owned the room. And Henry, for the first time in years, felt completely exposed. Rita stands firm, calm, mature. Henry's emotions crack. First moment of regret shown. Set up for deeper confrontation, the ballroom had never felt so loud and quiet at the same time. Conversations whispered behind manicured hands, heads turning in waves, eyes darting between Henry and the twins who now stood at Rita's side with innocent curiosity. Henry's world, carefully constructed, polished and guarded, was slipping out of his grasp. He could feel it. He could feel every eye burning into his skin. He could feel judgment crawling up his spine. And he could feel something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not fear of losing status. Not fear of his board. Not fear of public perception. Fear of the truth he abandoned finally catching him. He stepped closer to Rita, voice low, strained. "We need to talk. Privately." Rita didn't move. She didn't flinch. She didn't follow him. Instead, she looked at him the way a grown woman looks at a man who once broke her spirit and now has no power to do so again. "We can talk," she replied calmly. "But not because you called me. I talk when I'm ready." The crowd didn't react loudly, but their silence was its own applause. Henry clenched his jaw. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not on his own stage. "Rita, this isn't the time or place." She held his gaze steadily. "You made it the place the moment you invited me up here." Her tone wasn't sharp. It wasn't angry. It was composed, grounded, and painfully honest. Henry glanced at the twins again. Their resemblance hit him harder with every passing second. They stared back at him with wide-eyed innocence, unaware of the storms swirling around them. "Please," he said, the word nearly a whisper. "Just step off stage with me." The firmness in his voice cracked. It wasn't authoritative anymore. It wasn't strategic. It was desperate. And that was when Rita saw it. The shift. The first fracture in Henry's emotional armor. The crowd saw it too. For the first time, Henry looked less like a CEO and more like a man wrestling with the weight of his own choices. Rita exhaled softly, then glanced down at her children. "You two stay right here with me," she murmured. One of them nodded, gripping her dress lightly. Rita stepped forward, but not toward Henry. She moved slightly to the side, creating space that signaled one clear message. "I'm not following you. You're approaching me." Henry swallowed hard, and did exactly that. When he stood close enough for only her to hear, he spoke quietly, tension trembling through each word. Are they mine?" Rita didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied his face, looking not for sincerity, but for accountability. Her voice was soft, but piercing when she finally spoke. "You walked away before I even had the chance to tell you anything." Henry shut his eyes briefly as if bracing for impact. He deserved that blow, and he knew it. Rita continued, her tone steady. "You didn't ask. You didn't listen. You made a decision based on fear and reputation, and the consequences didn't disappear just because you closed a door." Henry opened his eyes again. The regret shining there wasn't subtle. It was raw, exposed, unfamiliar on a man who always hid behind success. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't want to know," she corrected. Henry inhaled, shaky and uneven. The weight of her words settled deep inside him. His vision blurred slightly, not from embarrassment but from something heavier, realization. For the first time since their breakup, Rita saw past his cold exterior and straight into the guilt he had buried under schedules, meetings, and the illusion of control. "I need to talk to you," he said again, voice breaking at the edges. "Please, not for the event, not for the crowd. For me." Rita held his gaze. She didn't soften. She didn't harden. She simply stood as a woman who had learned to protect her peace. "We'll talk," she said quietly, "but on my terms." Henry nodded, the fight draining from his shoulders. And just like that, the stage ceased being his territory. It became hers. The crowd watched them step down, sensing the shift in power. Rita walked with the twins at her side, steady, graceful, and unshaken. Henry followed a few steps, behind, carrying the weight of a truth he had spent years pretending he didn't need. This moment wasn't the confrontation. It was the threshold, the place just before everything breaks open. Henry is devastated and furious at himself. Henry led Rita toward a smaller lounge room connected to the ballroom, trying to keep his breathing even as murmurs rippled across the event hall behind them. He opened the door, stepped inside, and waited for her to follow before closing them into the quiet. The room was dimmer, decorated with velvet seating and muted lighting. A soft hum from the ballroom lingered through the walls, but in here, it was just the two of them, two people standing in the aftermath of choices that had changed everything. Henry turned to face her, his composure cracking under the weight of truth he wasn't prepared to confront. "Rita," he began, but the words fell apart before forming. Rita stood tall, steady, her twins just outside the room with a staff member keeping an eye on them. She crossed her arms, not defensively, but firmly, ready to finally face the man who once dismissed her voice without hearing it. "You wanted to talk," she said softly. "So talk." Henry swallowed hard. I didn't know. About them. About anything. You didn't want to know," she corrected again calmly. He closed his eyes, ashamed of how true that was. Rita continued, her tone even, the pain hidden beneath the surface like a scar healed but never forgotten. "The night you ended things, Henry, you didn't let me say a single word. I came to your place to talk, hoping we could work through it. I had something important to share." His chest tightened. "You were going to tell me?" "Yes," she replied, "but you had already decided who I was, what I meant, what you thought people would say about us. You cut me off before the conversation even began." Henry felt every syllable as if she were placing the truth directly in his hands, weight he could no longer ignore. Rita walked past him and sat on a couch, her posture still dignified. "I found out I was pregnant a few weeks after the breakup," she said quietly. "I went to the clinic alone. I saw two tiny hearts beating on a screen. 2 lives depending on me." Henry froze, unable to blink. "2," he whispered. "Twins." Rita nodded. "Yes. And every part of me wanted to tell you. But how do you go back to a man who slammed the door in your face? Who cared more about board opinions than your feelings?" Her words didn't rise in anger. They landed in truth. Henry sat slowly across from her, elbows on his knees, hands trembling slightly. "I didn't know you were hurting that much," he murmured. "You didn't care to ask." He flinched. Rita leaned back. "I wasn't going to beg you to stay. I wasn't going to chase after someone who chose reputation over respect, so I walked away. And I raised our children on my own." The final words struck him harder than anything else she said. "Our children." Henry's breathing grew uneven. Fury twisted inside him, not directed at Rita, but at himself. At the man he had been. At the choices he made. At the version of Henry who thought detachment equaled strength. He covered his mouth with one hand, staring at the carpet, as if it held the years he lost. Rita watched him, her eyes softening only slightly. "This isn't about revenge, Henry. This is about truth, a truth that didn't disappear just because you tried to." Henry lifted his head slowly. His eyes were glossy, his usual calm replaced with a rawness he had kept buried for far too long. "I should have listened," he whispered. "I should have fought for us. I should have cared less about everyone else and more about you. I should have..." You didn't, she said, cutting gently through the spiral of regret. And this is where we are. Henry pressed a hand to his forehead, devastated by the realization of how much he missed, not just years of fatherhood, but moments he could never recreate. He didn't speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice cracked. Rita, I'm furious. At myself. I don't know how I let you go. I don't know how I didn't see what I was losing. Rita breathed out slowly, not in forgiveness, but in closure. We can't change the past, she replied. But we can face it. Henry nodded, broken in a way only truth can break a person. Outside the room, the twins giggled, a sound innocent, pure, untouched by the mistakes of their parents. Inside, Henry felt something shift inside him for the first time. Regret, responsibility, longing, grief for moments he couldn't reclaim. And under all of it, a desperate need to make things right. This was only the beginning of the truth he needed to face. Emotional moment, not over the top, realistic, grounded. Twins' natural innocence softens him. Henry opened the door to the hallway slowly, as though stepping into a world he no longer recognized. The twins sat on a bench outside the private lounge, swinging their legs while a staff member kept an eye on them. They were relaxed, unaware of the weight of adult decisions happening just a few feet away. Rita walked beside Henry, calm and steady, giving him space without granting him comfort. Not yet. This moment wasn't for her. It wasn't for the crowd. It was for the children and the father who didn't know he had missed the most important years of his life. The twins looked up at the sound of footsteps. Their eyes, those same eyes Henry saw in the mirror every day, lit up with curiosity. The little boy tilted his head. Mommy, is he coming with us? Rita nodded gently. Yes, baby. He needs to talk to you both. Henry inhaled slowly, trying to keep himself grounded as the truth pulled at him from the inside. He had spoken at conferences, on stages, in boardrooms full of powerful people, but never had his voice trembled the way it did as he approached his children. He crouched down to their level, unsure what to say, unsure how to start. The girl, slightly quieter but just as observant, leaned closer to her brother and whispered, loud enough for Henry to hear, "He looks nervous." The staff member, hiding a smile, turned away politely. Henry let out a shaky breath. I am. The twins blinked at him, waiting. Rita stood nearby, arms folded, not blocking the moment, not guiding it, simply allowing it to unfold. Henry cleared his throat and said softly, "Hello." The boy smiled immediately. "Hi, Mommy said you're someone she used to know." "That's true," Henry replied carefully. The girl offered him a small wave. "Your voice sounds fancy." Rita suppressed a laugh behind them. Henry managed a fragile smile, the tension in his shoulders loosening as the twins continued studying him with open innocence. Children don't hide emotion. They don't judge. They don't pretend. Their simplicity pierced him deeper than any confrontation could. The boy stepped closer, examining Henry's suit jacket, then his face. "You have the same nose as me." Henry felt something crack in his chest, not painfully, but profoundly. The girl nodded. "And your eyes look like ours too." Henry swallowed hard, unable to speak for a moment. His voice, when it finally came, was rough. "You're right." The boy reached out and touched Henry's tie. "Are you important?" Henry glanced at Rita instinctively, uncertain how to answer. Rita answered for him. "He's learning how to be." The twins accepted this without question. Henry turned back to them, letting out a quiet breath he didn't realize he had been holding. They were his. He didn't need a test, a document, or an explanation. He could see himself reflected in them so clearly that denial wasn't just impossible, it felt ridiculous. The boy suddenly asked, "Do you like snacks?" Henry blinked. "Snacks?" "Yeah," the boy said. "We like fruit snacks. But Mommy says too many will make us bounce off the walls." The girl nodded rapidly. "She's right." Henry laughed, a small, unsteady laugh but genuine. "I like snacks too." This simple connection, formed through child logic, softened something deep inside him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was real. The children moved closer, one standing by each side of him as though claiming him without knowing the significance of their actions. The girl tugged on his sleeve. "Are you going to stay for a little bit?" Henry paused, overwhelmed by the weight of what stay meant. Rita stepped forward, her tone steady as she clarified for the twins. He's here right now, and that's enough for the moment. The children accepted her answer, returning to their innocent fascination with Henry's suit and tie. Henry watched them with an expression tangled in awe, regret, and a tenderness he had never accessed within himself. He had spent years mastering boardrooms, years controlling his reputation, years shaping an image that impressed everyone around him. Yet this simple moment with two small children was breaking him open in ways he wasn't prepared for. The twins giggled as the boy tugged Henry's tie playfully. "You're funny looking when you kneel," the boy said. Henry smiled softly. "I bet I am." The girl leaned close to inspect his face again. "You don't smile much, do you?" Henry's throat tightened. Rita watched quietly. Her expression shifted just slightly, an unreadable blend of pride, sadness, and something gentler she wasn't willing to name yet. Henry exhaled, voice low. "I haven't had much to smile about, until now." The twins didn't understand the deeper meaning, but Rita did. And for the first time since the breakup years ago, she saw sincerity in Henry that wasn't filtered through his fears or his obsession with image. This moment didn't heal everything, but it opened the door. The truth was finally real, undeniable, standing right in front of him. And Henry felt the weight of it settle into his heart, not as guilt alone, but as responsibility, as possibility, as the beginning of something he could no longer run from. Rita listens, but remains emotionally guarded. Rita teaches him the lesson. Love without respect is humiliation. Image without integrity is emptiness. Henry stayed crouched beside the twins for a long moment, after their playful questions faded into soft giggles. He had never felt so vulnerable in his life, not during board negotiations, not during public speeches, not even during the night he ended things with Rita. This was different. This moment wasn't about reputation, status, or control. It was about truth, and truth demanded humility. When Rita stepped closer, gently calling the twins back to her side, Henry rose slowly to his feet. His chest felt heavy, as if every mistake he had made was now physically pressing against his ribs. The twins moved a short distance away, still within reach, giving their parents unspoken space. Their innocence made the moment feel even more fragile. Henry turned to Rita, hesitating before speaking. "Rita, I'm sorry." Not rehearsed, not polished, not strategic, just raw, honest words. Rita didn't respond immediately. Her expression remained composed, neither hostile nor forgiving. Her emotional walls didn't rise higher, but they didn't lower either. Henry continued, voice tight. "I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. I should have stood beside you, instead of behind everyone else's expectations." Rita exhaled softly. "You made choices, Henry. Choices that told me exactly where I stood in your life." He nodded slowly. "And I regret those choices every day." Rita didn't soften. She didn't want a performance. "I'm not here for regret," she said gently. "I'm here for honesty." Henry swallowed hard. "Then let me be honest. I failed you. I was so focused on protecting my image that I stopped protecting the person who loved me. I thought distance would keep everything stable, but all it did was break everything important." Rita looked at him steadily, allowing his words to settle in the space between them. The twins, sensing the seriousness, leaned lightly against her thighs, grounding her with the simple weight of their presence. Henry continued, his voice trembling for the first time in years. "I missed out on years of their lives because of my pride. I missed out on years of your life because of fear. I convinced myself I was choosing responsibility, but the truth is, I chose cowardice." Rita blinked slowly, the only sign that his words resonated. Henry stepped a little closer, careful not to overwhelm her. "You didn't deserve what I did. You deserved someone who fought for you. And I didn't fight at all." Rita let silence hold for a moment before responding. Her voice was calm, but every word carried depth. "Henry, love without respect is humiliation, and I refused to build my life on humiliation. I walked away because staying would have destroyed me." Henry lowered his gaze, her words cutting deeper than any accusation could. "And image without integrity," she continued, "is emptiness. You built a life that looked perfect on the outside, but inside, you were collapsing. You just didn't realize it yet." Henry lifted his eyes, the truth settling painfully behind them. Rita didn't raise her voice. She didn't lecture. She didn't punish. She spoke as a woman who had grown beyond the hurt. "I forgave myself for loving you," she said softly. "But I haven't decided what to do with you now, not yet. I'm not rushing that decision, and I won't let you rush it either." Her boundaries were clear, her power unmistakable. Henry nodded, accepting her words with a humility he had never shown before. "I'm not asking you to decide anything today. I just want the chance to show you who I am now, who I'm trying to become." Rita looked at him with level eyes. "Then start with accountability, Henry, not promises." He nodded again, this time more firmly. "I will." The twins tugged at Rita's hands then, pulling her gently back toward the ballroom doors. Henry watched them go, not with ownership, but with the yearning of a man finally awakening to the truth he had avoided. Rita paused at the doorway and turned back slightly. "This conversation doesn't fix everything," she said. "It just opens the door." Henry nodded once more. "That's more than I deserve. But thank you." Rita didn't answer. She simply walked away with her children, strong, steady, and beautifully unbroken. Henry remained still, surrounded by the quiet of the hallway, breathing in the weight of a truth he could no longer run from. This was the beginning of his reckoning, and the beginning of her lesson finally being heard. He begins self-improvement, not cliché, realistic steps. The night Rita walked into the Grand Monarch Hotel ballroom, with the twins replayed in Henry's mind long after the event ended. He had stood on that stage frozen, watching her hold the hands of two children whose faces mirrored his own. The humiliation he had prepared for her flipped instantly, exposing the emptiness inside him instead. In the days that followed, Henry could no longer hide from the truth he'd avoided for years. Every silence in his penthouse grew heavier. Every reflection in the mirror showed a man who had built a world so polished it left no room for humanity. The more he tried to focus on work, the more scattered he felt. He caught himself rereading the same emails without absorbing the words. Meetings blurred together. Numbers he once memorized effortlessly now required double-checking. He had always prided himself on control. But now, control slipped through his fingers like sand. One evening, after a tense board meeting where his lack of focus became impossible to deny, Henry sat alone in his office as the lights of Las Vegas glimmered below him. For the first time in a long time he allowed himself to sit still. No mask, no posture, no rehearsed composure. He whispered into the quiet room, "What have I done?" Those words cracked something open inside him. He remembered Rita's expression the night he pushed her away. He remembered the hurt he brushed off, because he was afraid of judgment. He remembered how easily he had let the only genuine connection in his life slip away. And now, two children who had his eyes were walking the earth without him even knowing. He couldn't escape the truth anymore. The next morning, Henry did something no one in his circle expected. He typed the words, "Relationship Therapist Las Vegas," into his phone. For a man who built entire strategies around appearances, admitting he needed help felt like jumping into cold water. But the alternative, continuing as the man who destroyed everything he loved, felt far worse. He scheduled an appointment. The therapy office was nothing like the boardrooms Henry was used to. It was warm, quiet, and intentionally gentle. A small water fountain murmured in the corner, and the soft chairs invited comfort rather than performance. The therapist nodded with calm understanding when Henry explained why he came. "I've spent my life protecting an image," he said, "and I let it cost me everything." The therapist asked him a simple question. "Whose approval were you really trying to secure?" Henry hesitated. He thought of his family's expectations. He thought of the board's scrutiny. He thought of the world that praised him only when he was perfect. "I don't know," he said. But he did know. He just wasn't ready to speak it yet. During that session and the ones that followed, Henry confronted truths he had buried under decades of discipline. He feared being judged. He feared appearing weak. He feared loving someone who didn't fit the mold society set for him. He feared losing control. But in protecting himself from those fears, he had created a life with no space for vulnerability, joy, or authenticity. The therapist helped him understand that reputation was not the same as integrity. Reputation belonged to others. Integrity belonged to him. For the first time in years, Henry felt something shift. Henry didn't stop at therapy. He began making tangible changes, real ones, not symbolic gestures. He reduced unnecessary commitments. He stopped attending social gatherings that drained him. He told his assistant to only schedule meetings that mattered. He made quieter mornings for himself instead of racing to the office at dawn. Most importantly, he allowed himself to feel. Sometimes that meant sitting in silence, processing guilt he had ignored. Sometimes it meant writing down thoughts he had never spoken aloud. Sometimes it meant admitting he missed Rita, not because she made him comfortable, but because she made him honest. He didn't know if repairing anything was possible. He didn't know if she would even listen, but he knew one thing clearly. If he wanted to become someone worthy of being in his children's lives, he needed to change from the inside out, not for image, not for approval, but for truth. For once, Henry wasn't acting for the world. He was acting for himself, and for the two small faces who had shattered his illusion of control in a single moment. She focuses on her business and the twins' future. Henry begins earning trust back through consistent actions. Rita had not planned to cross paths with Henry again after the night she stepped into his ballroom with the twins. She didn't regret showing up. She had walked in with dignity, strength, and the two greatest loves of her life, but she had no intention of letting that moment pull her back toward him emotionally. Her focus was her children, her business, her peace. Life with the twins kept her busy from sunrise to sunset. Mornings were filled with giggles, spilled cereal, and tiny feet pattering across the apartment floor. Afternoons meant running her decorating business while juggling naps, milk bottles, and the unpredictable moods of toddlers who seemed to switch personalities every hour. Her living room was a daily battlefield of toys, pillows, and miniature socks, and yet she wouldn't have traded it for anything. The chaos came with joy. The mess came with laughter. The responsibility came with purpose. And her business, despite the challenges of single motherhood, continued to grow. Clients appreciated her creativity and her warm approach. Word of mouth spread stronger than ever. Weddings at the Venetian, corporate functions in downtown Vegas, charity galas. Rita's calendar stayed full because people trusted both her eye and her spirit. But something quiet lingered at the back of her mind. Henry, not the Henry she walked away from years ago, and not the one who tried humiliating her that night at the event. This Henry felt different. Since the incident at the ballroom, Henry hadn't tried to force conversations or make dramatic gestures. He hadn't shown up unannounced or demanded explanations. Instead, he reached out with patience, messages that were respectful, short, and never intrusive. If you're comfortable talking, I'd appreciate a chance to listen. No pressure. When you're ready, I'm working on myself. Thank you for giving me clarity, even if it hurt. There were no excuses in his words, no self-pity, no entitlement. Rita didn't respond at first. She told herself her silence wasn't punishment, it was protection. She had 2 children to raise, a business to run, and a heart she wasn't ready to expose again. But over the weeks, she noticed something undeniable. Henry was changing. He began sending financial support, not as an attempt to buy forgiveness, but because he understood he had responsibilities. And he didn't send money blindly. He asked if it was acceptable before doing anything. He also requested updates, politely, about the twins' well-being, never pushing for photos or visits unless Rita offered. He respected boundaries she had not even defined formally. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, Rita sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her messages. She read Henry's words again and again. Something in them felt grounded, sincere. Her cousin, who had stopped by to drop off baby clothes, noticed her expression. "You okay?" she asked, placing a hand on Rita's shoulder. Rita sighed softly. "He's different. At least, he sounds different." "Well," her cousin replied, "people change when life forces them to look in the mirror." Rita nodded. She wasn't rushing to conclusions. She wasn't opening a door she wasn't ready for. But she also couldn't deny that Henry, for once, was doing the work, not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency. Meanwhile, Henry was learning patience the hard way. Therapy had become a weekly routine, one he didn't skip no matter how busy he was. He confronted patterns he never recognized, how his parents conditioned him to chase perfection, how he confused approval with love, how he let fear dictate every meaningful decision. He no longer cared about appearing flawless. He cared about being present, being better, being human. He didn't shave his emotions down to fit into a corporate mold anymore. If he felt regret, he acknowledged it. If he felt hope, he didn't smother it. And if he missed Rita and the twins, which he did, deeply, He allowed himself to feel it without masking the truth. But he never pushed. He knew he had no right to demand anything. He knew trust wasn't owed. He knew time was the only currency that mattered now. Every message he sent was thoughtful. Every gesture was measured. Every step was patient. And slowly, quiet as the soft wind that drifts through Las Vegas at dusk, progress began. Weeks passed, and Rita noticed how the twins reacted when Henry's name appeared on her phone. They were too young to understand the depth of the connection, but their natural innocence made everything simple. One afternoon, while Rita was reviewing color samples for a wedding at Caesar's Palace, one of the twins toddled over, tugged at her shirt, and pointed at her phone lighting up with Henry's message. Rita smiled softly. "You recognize that name already?" The toddler jabbed the screen again, happy with himself. It was a small thing, but small things mattered. That evening, Rita typed a message back to Henry, the first she had sent since the event. "Thank you for being respectful. The twins are doing well." It wasn't emotional. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold either. It was a start. Henry reread her words multiple times, his chest tightening with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope rooted in humility, not expectation. He responded simply, "Thank you for trusting me with that update." No pressure, no assumptions, just gratitude. Rita didn't want to rush anything. Her heart deserved caution. Her children deserved stability. Her life had been carefully rebuilt with strength, and she had no intention of letting old wounds dictate her future. But she also believed in growth. She believed in accountability. She believed people could change if they faced themselves honestly. So she kept her focus, her business, her children, her peace. And if Henry truly wanted to earn a place in their lives, he would have to do it step by step, slow, steady, and with sincerity. For the first time, it seemed he understood that perfectly. Henry steps down from CEO position temporarily to work on himself. He offers Rita an unexpected gift, a scholarship fund in the twins' names and sponsorship for her event business. And with a powerful message about self-worth, lessons, growth. Final CTA, Henry stood in his office overlooking Las Vegas, the city glittering below him like a restless ocean of lights. It was the same view he once admired as a symbol of achievement, proof that he had climbed higher than anyone expected. But now, the reflection staring back at him in the window wasn't a man celebrating power. It was a man confronting truth. Weeks of therapy, self-reflection, and quiet nights had peeled back the layers he spent years building. The carefully curated image no longer comforted him. The awards didn't fill him. The boardroom victories didn't reach the parts of him that mattered anymore. His company was thriving. But he was not. He thought of the twins, the way their tiny hands clung to Rita, the way they stared around the ballroom that night with innocent curiosity, unaware of how much they had changed his world in seconds. He thought of Rita's controlled grace, her strength, her dignity. He had lost so much the moment he pushed her away. Now, he was determined not to repeat the same mistakes. That morning, Henry called an emergency meeting with the board. They expected another update on quarterly projections. Instead, he sat at the head of the long polished table, shoulders relaxed, expression calm. "I'm stepping back," he said simply. The room went silent. Temporarily, he continued, "I need time to focus on personal growth. I need to be present in my life, not just my career." His board members exchanged stunned glances. Some thought he was joking. Others looked alarmed. But Henry didn't flinch. He finally understood something he'd never admitted. His company wasn't his identity. His reputation wasn't his purpose. And the life he wanted, one filled with authenticity and connection, required space he had never allowed himself to have. For the first time, Henry's decision wasn't about pressure or appearances. It was about healing. He left the meeting feeling lighter than he had in years. A week later, Henry arranged to meet Rita at a quiet cafe near her neighborhood. She chose the location, neutral ground, simple, no distractions. She arrived with the twins in their stroller, both of them wiggling and kicking their feet as if excited for something only they understood. Henry stood when she approached. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. Rita nodded, keeping her expression measured. "You asked respectfully. That's something." They sat across from one another, while the twins babbled softly between them. Henry watched them, his eyes warming in a way Rita hadn't seen in years. "You look better," Rita said carefully. "I feel better," Henry replied. "I've made changes. and I'm continuing to make them." He took a breath and placed a folder on the table. "I want to give the twins something meaningful," he began. "Not guilt, not apologies, something that prepares them for life." Rita raised an eyebrow, but stayed silent. Henry opened the folder. "These," he said, sliding out documents, "are scholarship funds set in their names. They will never have to worry about school expenses." Rita's breath caught, but she didn't interrupt. "And this," Henry continued, placing another envelope beside it, "is my sponsorship commitment to your business. Not as a favor, not as reparations, but because you deserve support. Your work deserves to grow." Rita looked down at the papers, then back at Henry. Her voice softened. "You didn't have to do this. I know," he said, "but I wanted to. Because for the first time in my life, I'm choosing what truly matters." There was no desperation in his tone, no pleading, just sincerity. Rita leaned back, studying him carefully. "I won't make promises," she finally said. "I won't rush anything. The twins come first. My peace comes first." "I understand," Henry replied. "I'm not asking for anything except the chance to show you I'm not the man you walked away from." One of the twins suddenly reached for Henry's sleeve, tugging at it with tiny fingers. Henry smiled, genuinely without hesitation, and gently touched the baby's hand. Rita saw it. She felt it. A shift, not romantic, not rushed, but meaningful. Growth wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it looked like a man finally showing up for his children. Sometimes it looked like a woman finally receiving the respect she always deserved. Sometimes it looked like two people moving forward, not together, not apart, but with clarity. As they left the cafe, Rita strapped the twins into their stroller. Henry stood watching them with quiet admiration, no longer the man who valued image above all, but a father learning to value truth. Rita turned to him before walking away. "Thank you for taking responsibility." Henry nodded. "Thank you for giving me a reason to." She walked off, the twins giggling as she pushed the stroller forward. Henry stayed still, watching the three of them grow smaller in the distance. He didn't chase after them. He didn't demand anything. He simply stood there with a peaceful expression, finally understanding what it meant to choose integrity over appearance. Rita didn't look back, but she didn't need to. She knew the lesson had been learned. And for once, life felt exactly how it was meant to be, balanced, honest, healing, not perfect, just real. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more powerful, emotional, unforgettable tales to life. Thank you for being part of Mr. Steve Stories.